Hey guys, Chairman here. Just back from BCS Houston, had a crazy weekend there, and guess what deck made top 8 again at a Bushiroad official sanction event? That's right, it's Tokyo Revengers, it's Dual Laners, it's the exact same list you all know and love. Huge shout out to my friend Hansen, Fresh Cabbage. He was on the Tresses Collectibles BRO 2022 review stream with me and Mike, and we had a great time together. He was the AO champion. Crazy good player, took this deck to top 8 after losing round 1, just goes undefeated for the rest of Swiss. This guy is an absolute monster. Huge shout out to him, huge congrats. What a guy. And I keep saying this deck. I don't mean that he played my deck list. I mean he literally played my deck. This is the deck that he played. And this is the deck that I played for Bushiroad Rumble Online 2022. Basically what happened last Sunday was I played in top 8, I lost unfortunately in round 1, and then I went on to judge the Bushiroad Rumble Online 2022 for NA, judged all of top 8. Afterwards, took a quick break, maybe like 30 minutes, drove down about like half an hour to 45 minutes down south, met up with Hansen, just handed him this deck box. This deck, he changed the sleeves because the sleeves were getting kind of old, and he just took this to Houston and he made top 8. The exact same list, no changes. I mean, he had to register it before, BRO, so we didn't get to register any deck changes and stuff like that. And yeah, just another top 8, just 1 week after this deck made top 8 in BRO, piloted by a completely different player. Obviously, this guy is just amazing player, definitely better than me, but if there's any doubt that this deck is not good, I think the results that this exact specific list got over the course of these past 2 weekends have, I think, just shown that this deck is a contender. It's a really good, really strong deck. So you guys all know the list, the deck profiles on Tresses Collectibles. The combo video is on this channel. I don't want to really talk about any of that. Really, I just want to make a quick short video kind of congratulating my friend Hansen, talking about how this list made top. Yes, it is the exact same list. Yes, it is literally the exact same cards that I have. This was the $25 deck, but I will also talk about a few changes that I would make based on the runs that both me and Hansen made with this deck. Obviously, top 8 is great, but what kind of changes could we make going forward with this deck that could potentially propel it to that #1 finish? What are some of like the hurt points that we both experienced, some of the ways the deck felt kind of weak, and how can we really combat it? First things first, I think the most important card that I was not running in this list before that I definitely will run moving forward is this card. This is the 3/2, no matter how many times I fall Takemichi. This card is super important for this list because currently in the meta, there are a lot of matchups at level 3 where we need to side. Mushoku Tensei has a rest counter, so that means that our first 2 attacks must side in order for them to not rest our Baji. Against Hololive, they also have a rest counter. So we need to side the first 2 attacks so that they can't rest our Baji. And we can front with Baji, which is not bad, but that's not great. Against other matchups where they have memory counter, for example, like Bane Dream and also the upcoming Quint set where they have memory counter, we need to side attack all 3 of our attacks, because if any of our characters gets reversed when they use a memory counter, that character gets sent to memory. If they send one of our Mikeys, we lose a burn on our potential endgame. And if they memory counter our Baji, well, we lose the entire combo, which is absolutely terrifying, honestly. Like that's just the worst possible outcome for this deck, right? I guess honestly against memory counter you can possibly just front the first 2, and you missing 1 burn isn't the biggest deal, but like you can't front the Baji against the memory counter deck. So both rest counter and memory counter are very strong right now in the meta, and they're also very prevalent. All the top tier decks basically have access to it. Therefore, we need a way for us to play around those counters, and this bouncer is the best way. It's a guaranteed bounce. You play it, you top check 3, put them in any order you want, and then you choose one of your opponent's characters and you bounce it. This also plays around cards like Berkuli that would basically single-handedly just destroy the endgame combo of this deck. This is our one of out to getting rid of anything that can stop us and just going for that lethal. It's also really good if you bounce the card where your Baji is going to attack, even though your Baji is going to be directing for 4. The Summon Mikey loses the climax because the 1k1 gets sacked. So the Summon Mikey is going to direct for 3. That's a really nice number to be directing for at the end of the game. Especially if you're trying to kill them from like 2-2 or low 2s, your last attack might want to swing for something like a 3 instead of a 2. The second thing that this card does really well is that it gives us information of the top 3 cards of our deck. Now, this can be used before or after our Mitsuya burns. So before or after, right? You can think of it like this. So another thing that really kind of hurt both me and Hansen when we were playing this deck at the end game is Mitsuya burns missing. I milled a ton of zeros during my BRO run. Hansen also milled a ton of zeros during his BCS run, and that was actually the reason why he lost the top 8 match. He actually hit somebody from 2-4 to 3-6, and he could have killed his opponent had he not only milled 1 soul trigger between 2 Mitsuyas. So out of 4 cards milled, he only hit 1 soul trigger. That's really awful, right? And so I think what this Takemichi allows us to do is we can play this before our Mitsuya burns to see if there's even any burns in the top 3 cards of the deck. And if the top 3 cards of the deck have no soul triggers, well, there's no point in using Mitsuya at this point, because we're gonna miss, right? So we, instead of wasting stock on the Mitsuya, we can do something like a brainstorm. We can potentially use a Baji to grab those 3 cards, take those misses out of our deck, and then we can play the Mitsuya to try to hit afterwards, right? Alternatively, if we play the Takemichi and we see that they're all soul triggers, well, it's time to Mitsuya, right? So giving up 1 Mitsuya burn for the top check 3 to know whether or not Mitsuyas are even going to be a good idea, I think is actually really solid, especially if it's playing double duty and making sure our opponent doesn't have a character on the board that they can use a rest or a memory counter, right? So I think, yeah, in the future, like especially for the Mushoku matchup, also for the Hotline matchup, we can start our combo with Takemichi to bounce on their characters and also give us knowledge of Mitsuya burn. So if we see empty and we have enough stock, we can use like a Baji or a Brainstorm to mill. If we see soul triggers, well, it's time to go into Mitsuya, right? Alternatively, if we already know, let's say we're at the bottom of our deck, like our deck is like maybe 1 or 2 cards left and we know we have a soul trigger, therefore like the Takemichi is not going to be that good, we can start our combo with the Mitsuya. We like mill the soul triggers, and then in the middle of the combo we can play the Takemichi to get the bounce and also information of the next 3 triggers. That gives us more information for us to side with, right? So if we play this and we see that the next 3 cards are going to be soul triggers, well, maybe we can just start siding for 1s. We know that we can side at level 3 for 1 damage, which is really nice. And if we know that they're not soul triggers, well, then we know that we're not going to be siding for damage, and potentially we might have to front in order to actually get damage through, or maybe we need to mill those cards with like a brainstorm or something so that we can side for good numbers if we need to side, right? It just gives us so much information about the next cards that we're going to trigger for whether we side or front. And alongside the Emma Brainstorm, wherever the Emma Brainstorm is, alongside the Emma Brainstorm, we get really good knowledge of the next cards of our deck, right? So we know the top 3, and the Emma can also allow us to check the 4th one, and we can choose between the 3rd or the 4th, or maybe the 2nd or 3rd for the Emma trigger. So basically, the next 4 cards of our deck, we can choose how we want to trigger it, when we want to trigger it. It gives us a lot of control for the final turn. So this is honestly MVP card that I'm really sad I didn't get to include, and between my run and Hansen's run, I think this would be a huge benefit for the deck, a huge upgrade. And what we take out for this, it really doesn't matter, honestly. This card definitely needs to go in over anything else. This card's really important. All right, so this is the first thing that I would like to add to the deck, so I'll move it over here. The second thing I want to add to the deck is more copies of the level 0 Riki. I am only playing 1 in the list, and I explained why I thought at the time that 1 was good, but I have talked to other people, and they have kind of convinced me that more Riki might be better, because specifically for the situation where we want to hit level 1 first, let's say they hit us to like 0.4 or 0.5, and we just want to hit level 1 immediately. Like staying at 0.5 is not going to do our deck any benefit. When we're so close to level 1, we can hit level 1, get the dual laners out, and start getting the advantage from our dual laners. But if we're stuck at around 0.5, 0.6, then that's really uncomfortable for the deck. And having extra clock effects like Riki will be able to help us get to level 1 when we want to, so that we can start the dual laning process. Also, the shuffle back 2, I didn't use it a lot because it was hard to get access to, but I think with more Rikis, we can also have more access to shuffle back 2, which could be good on final turn, right? Instead of playing like a Mitsuya, or if we don't have enough stock to play an extra Mitsuya, or like if we don't have enough stock to play a Takemichi, we can just use the shuffle back 2, put 2 soul triggers back, making our Mitsuyas way better instead of just always missing. So because of that, I have bought 4 copies of the SR Riki. Actually, I like this art better, so I did purchase 4. And I think you could play between 3 or 4. I think 3 to 4 is a good number. And you can probably try it out. Honestly, anything between 1 and 4 is good. I do want to test more Riki. I think more Riki is probably better, but whether that's 2, 3, or 4, I think it could be up to personal preference and like your playstyle with the deck. But I do think up to 4 Riki is good in this deck. With 4 Riki, 4 of the level 0 Takemichi, and 4 of the level 0 Mikey, you have 12 ways to clock yourself starting level 0. So you have just incredible control over when you hit certain levels, when you hit these thresholds, and they're all basically advantage, right? So like Riki gives you a card for 1 stock, 1 clock. Takemichi gives you a stock for 1 clock, and then Mikey gives you the mill 5 and also the filter for 1 clock. So you're not just clocking yourself for no reason, you're clocking yourself for a lot of good advantageous stuff, right? So yeah. And what are we cutting for? Let's just say 4 Riki and 1 Takemichi, right? So obviously, we cut the non-foil Riki, but I think one of the big ways that this deck can cut is cutting some number of My Treasure Baji. So I don't think My Treasure Baji is as good as I initially thought at high numbers. I think at 4 it's a little overkill. I do think this card is really good in specific situations, but I value it less at level 0 and I value it more later on in the game. And if I value it less at level 0, then obviously I don't need to run it at this many copies if I can just grab it later and just kind of hold it, right? So I do think going down on copies of Baji will help open up slots to be running these other cards. I also think that the Riki makes some of the cards like this Drop Salvage and also this Drop Search a little redundant, so we can definitely take some of these out to put more copies of the Riki in, because these are all ways you use stock at level 0. We don't have that much stock to use, so depending on what we prioritize, we can potentially cut both of these for 2 copies of Riki just to play more Riki effects in the deck. Yeah, I think those are the main things that you could consider cutting. You can also consider cutting the Mitsuya back row. This card is really good in specific matchups, but not all those matchups come up, and at 3 copies, it's a little bit redundant. I like to run it at 3 copies just so like for the matchups where it's good, it's usually good early, and just being able to get it early is really nice. But you can argue that maybe even at 3 copies, you might not be able to see it consistently in the matchups that you want. Also, if you go up on Riki count, it's easier to get copies of the Mitsuya to hand on the matchups you want. You can just Riki for it. Therefore, you don't need to run 3 copies of this. You can go down to 2 copies and still get it consistently the more Rikis you run, because Riki just gets you to the cards that you need easier. So I think these are some options to think about and what I would go forward to if I were to stay with the same dual laner strategy. These are some of the changes I would make going forward with the deck. I do also want to test a bunch of other Tokyo Revengers ideas. There's a lot that this set has to offer. I don't think we've nearly even scraped the surface with this set. Anyways, I just want to make a pretty short video. Once again, congratulations to Hansen, Fresh Cabbage, for making top 8 with this deck. I'll see you guys next time. Peace be with you.